You boys be quiet down there!
In 1963, science fiction writer Kazumasa Hirai and manga artist Jiro Kawata created Eightman, Japan's first cyborg superhero. That same year, an anime TV series directed by Haruyuki Kawajima was also released, running for 56 episodes on TBS, ending in 1964. In 1965, the TV series was picked up and aired in English in the US as Tobor the Eighth Man. Get it? Tobor is robot, spelled backwards? Wow, they were clever.
What? It is me, isn't it? How very strange I look there. What in the world have you done with me?
The plot follows murdered detective Yokota, who is transformed into an android by Professor Tani. His new armored body is able to shapeshift and move at blinding speeds. Even though he disguises his appearance to look like his former human self again, for some reason he gives himself the new name Hachiro Azuma as his secret identity, known only to Tani and police chief Tanaka. Not even his girlfriend Sachiko and friend Ichiro know that Azuma is Eightman. In the original 5-volume manga, Eightman goes up against several villains, including Satsujin Robot 005, the demon Kozuma, and Cyber, the superhuman. In 1991, Eightman was turned into an arcade and Neo Geo game developed by Pallas, and that game is the subject of today's video, NGH-025. We'll be looking at Eightman on my MVS cartridge here. I must have gotten this game off of eBay sometime in the mid-2000s. The timing of the Eightman game is a bit strange, considering it was based on a 28-year-old property at the time. In 1987, a remake came in the form of a failed comedy TV drama that only lasted one episode. The timing of the 1991 game best coincides with a 1992 live-action film, which was likely in development and being previewed when the game was released. However, like all of the separate incarnations of Eightman, SNK's game appears to be its own self-contained universe. The game has its own somewhat separate art style and theming that doesn't resemble the original or any of the remakes. For some reason, Eightman only resembles the original manga in the opening and ending. In the rest of the game, he's blue, and during gameplay he sports a much more muscular physique. At the time when the game was released, it's unlikely that non-Japanese Neo Geo owners and players in the arcade had any idea that Eightman was based on an existing property, since it had been 26 years since the English version of the cartoon, and it generally wasn't considered a classic like it was in Japan. In 1993, a new 4-episode anime OVA series, Eightman After, was released, with a manga following in 1994. Both the Eightman After anime and manga had new authors. By this time, the Neo Geo game was already in the rearview mirror, so again, the game was not based on this property. Being from the 90s, of course this version of the anime is much grittier and more violent, whereas the original anime can often be more slapstick. It's as if they had almost no choice but to make it super violent, since it was the early 90s. So naturally, this version has blood splurting everywhere. Come on people, it's the early 90s. This is edgier, more adult. This isn't your lame baby boomer Eightman. And finally, in 2005 to 2007, a manga series titled Eightman Infinity was created by a new set of authors, Kyoichi Nanatsuki and Takayuki Takashi. Getting back to the game, now you might be thinking that because the Eightman game is made by Pallas, we've finally gotten to our first game in this video series that wasn't made by SNK or ADK. Well, hold on there. In the game credits, most of the staff use pseudonyms. But if we dig a little deeper, most of these names are actually just aliases for known SNK staff. One of the game directors is Seigo Ito, credited here as Deru Deru, who co-designed and produced several of the Fatal Fury games and others. Many of the programmers and designers are the usual SNK suspects. The game producer, Eikichi Kawasaki, doesn't even bother disguising his name. The game intro is even voiced by Michael Beard, basically the voice of SNK in the early days of the Neo Geo.
Runs as fast as lightning, the 8th super robot beats all evils. Eightman!
So what is the point of the developer Pallas if it's really just SNK in disguise? Well, Pallas was a failed attempt at starting another second-party developer. Alpha Denshi was a second-party developer, splitting off and becoming independent after creating 2 Neo Geo games, Magician Lord and Ninja Combat. Pallas, however, never got that far, being dissolved after just 2 of their games were released, Eightman and 2020 Super Baseball. A third game, Soccer Brawl, was also in development by Pallas under the working title Cybernetic Soccer, but the game ended up being simply released by SNK. Interestingly, all 3 Pallas games were robot-themed. In Greek mythology, Pallas was a titan who was married to Styx. Styx is also the famous 80s band that had the hit song Mr. Roboto, which was a song about a computerized robot made with parts from Japan. Get it? Their name is Pallas, and all of their games have robots. Coincidence? Yeah, probably. On my website back in the 90s, I gave Eightman an overall rating of 6 out of 10 and a grade of D-. I graded on a curve in those days where I had very high expectations of my Neo Geo games. So although I awarded only a D-, my overall impression of the game was more lukewarm than entirely negative. Press A to punch. The game calls it a punch, but it's actually more like a series of melee attacks, including kicks. This attack has a total of 3 different power levels, which can be upgraded by collecting P icons. Press B to jump. Press down and B to do a Mega Man 3 style slide. Or if you will, okay, Sunset Riders. If there's a game where you can slide with a button combination other than down and jump, I don't want to know about it. Pressing A and B together will perform a roundhouse kick, which is sometimes useful for attacking enemies behind you on the auto-scrolling sections, since you can't turn around without jumping in those sections, but not useful for much else. The C button is your bomb attack. Much like in shooters, you keep a stock of bombs that unleash mass destruction across the screen. If playing in 2-player mode, you'll notice this little animation that appears while standing close to your partner. If you press C while this animation is activated, you can do a more powerful team version of the special attack. Player 2 plays as 9-Man. You can see the 9 clearly on his chest in the quick opening transformation scene. But during the game, Player 2 is just a palette swap of 8-Man, with the number 8 clearly displayed on his costume. Not surprising, but it is a continuity problem. Side note, apparently the original author of 8-Man also took issue with the use of 9-Man as the 2-player character in the game. By the way, the items that 8-Man uses for energy in the original manga and anime basically looked like cigarettes, but the items in this game remind me a bit more of the capsules in 8-Man After, and those were basically drugs. The game has 4 stages, divided in multiple areas. That sounds short, but the game will take around 30 minutes to play through, the length of your average arcade game. The AES mode has multiple difficulty levels. If you play on a home console, you will have limited continues, but with a little practice, finishing the game is doable, even with the limit. If you abuse memory card saves, it's a cakewalk to finish the game with the limited AES credits. The memory card allows you to save and pick up from the area of the stage you left off on, so you don't have to go back to the first area of the stage. Area 1-1 is very short and ends with Super Robot 007 as the boss. Just prior to this, you get a tease of the Area 1-2 boss. Area 1-2 is one of a handful of auto-scrolling sections in the game where you get to see 8-Man's supersonic speed in action. Characters often lurk in the foreground or background before entering the play area, and these guys who jump through the play area several times without giving you a chance to hit them are pretty annoying, wasting time. Each of the 4 stages ends with a boss encounter. Area 1-3, for example, is Super Robot 005. This boss is easy actually, all you have to do is stay close in and duck when he attacks. Here in the first stage, the game goes easy on you, compared to later in the game when you'll be forced to take on 2 of this guy at the same time. The graphics in 8-Man are generally colorful and attractive. Area 2-1, however, is an example of several areas in the game that could really use some multi-layered parallax backgrounds. Area 2-2 is auto-scrolling, but not one of the running style areas like 1-2. Here, this drill man enemy with its legs split from the rest of its body is introduced. It's a good idea to try and divide your attacks evenly between the legs and the rest of the body, so that the top part is destroyed first, leaving only the legs to finish off. That way it won't have much chance to split off and come after you. Two-player mode is advantageous because with double the offensive power, it's generally more difficult for the enemies to gain the upper hand. Later in the game, you'll encounter this blue and yellow version of Drill Man, and you have to be extra careful because these can be more dangerous when they split up. The legless purple version that shows up later is super annoying because it takes a lot of hits and will float on and off the screen, so it's best to just stay clear of them and hope they go away. But I digress. Back to Area 2-2. This is almost like the R-Type style big battleship that we encountered in Last Resort and other shooters. The game will eventually force you to hitch a ride on the ship, destroying parts of it as you go, ending with this laser cannon on top. The area isn't a showstopper, coming in at only around 2.5 minutes, so it generally doesn't hurt the flow of the game. In areas 3-2 and 3-3, certain enemies will waste your precious time. In 3-3, these zombies will get back up after the first time you take them down, so you basically have to kill them twice. You won't be able to stick around and completely kill all of them, or you're liable to run out of time before finishing this area, at least in one-player mode. Running out of time will cost you a life, so it's best to just keep the zombies off you and keep moving. You need to watch out for these flying saucers that enter and exit flying across the top of the screen, because they drop bombs. If you have a chance to take them out as they pass, they often drop power-ups. In 3-2, it's these armadillo-like spello creatures that take a while to kill. And in this particular run, I get double robbed because I had one life bar left that I was saving to sacrifice to the time limit, but I accidentally get hit and die just before the time is up, and end up losing a fresh life due to the time limit. As you approach the end of the game, areas 4-2 and 4-3 contain somewhat of a mini boss rush, requiring you to fight some of the previous bosses again, this time more difficult, or facing more than one at once. Area 4-4 is the first phase of the final boss, Cyber. By the way, the game over screen in this game shows Cyber wreaking havoc on the city. 4-4 is probably the biggest time eater in the game, clocking in at 3.5 minutes, so it's still not too bad. You have to ride the elevator slowly up, with Cyber's body in the background, facing waves of enemies. This particular formation of orange guys that jump in from the foreground can be fussy about where it's safe to stand. You have to be in just the right place to avoid getting hit. Cyber's heartbeat as you pass is a great tension builder. After defeating Cyber's head at the top of the area, it's not over. Cyber's next phase is revealed. The skeleton design is pretty cool. Area 4-5, the running segment as you chase Cyber, is very short, only requiring you to hit him a certain number of times before proceeding. Cyber flees, and Stage 4 is getting a bit ridiculous at this point, but 4-6 is the final area of the game. You must face Cyber's final phase in a marathon of cheap hits designed to suck your money away. If you want, you can end it fairly quickly by simply using all your bombs and a few lives. There are a few key moments in the game where a well-timed bomb can be very rewarding. However, considering the large stock of bombs that the game continually awards you with, especially in the earlier stages, it can feel like a lazy way of making up for some of the cheap hits in this game. The music by SNK regular Yoshihiko Kitamura, credited here as Jojo Ha Kitapi, and others, is fairly generic and forgettable. Eightman brings us back into the category of bland, generic SNK rock soundtracks, the likes of Cyberlip and Riding Hero. However, the soundtrack here exceeds those titles simply because the music is featured more prominently, at a higher volume, and the generally fast, energetic tunes complement the game appropriately. Not every song in the game is high energy, but among the ones that are, there are a couple that almost would be bangers. The Area 1-1 theme, if you had a chance to hear the full track. And the Area 2-1 theme if it wasn't quite so repetitive. You really can't fault the soundtrack in Eightman. The instruments, including the light use of samples, sound good. The soundtrack maintains interest and complements the game perfectly. However, don't expect any themes from the anime to be featured here. Love that area clear theme. The robot voices announcing the items collected, as well as the noise when you take a hit, can be annoying. There are also voices for some of the boss characters, and the rest of the sound effects are unobtrusive enough. The sound when the third stage boss Kozuma attacks is confusing because it sounds too much like the sound when Eightman gets hit. Eightman was never released for Neo Geo CD. The obvious reason is that SNK's license for Eightman ran out sometime in 1993, before the Neo Geo CD system was released. The game was literally omitted from SNK's 1994 catalog, and no longer appeared going forward because the license was not renewed. There is a fan conversion to the Neo Geo CD out there, but don't bother with it. Not only are there missing audio samples from the music and ear-piercing audio glitches where some of the samples should be, just like in the King of the Monsters Neo Geo CD conversion, but you also can't even actually play past Area 3-2 in this version. The conversion always spontaneously resets midway through this area, and I tested on both the top loader and the CDZ in several modes to make sure my system wasn't the problem.
What in the world have you done with me?
For reference, the fan conversion loads the whole game up in 51 seconds on a single-speed, non-CDZ system. Regardless of the merits the manga and anime it's based on may have, Eightman the game is uninspired and has some cheap hits, but acquits itself well enough as a casual arcade experience. Eightman is responsive and his melee attacks are satisfying to use. At first, some of the enemy attacks feel unfair, but there is room to hone your skills in one-player mode and make the game more manageable. On at least one occasion, I've had someone over and we played through the two-player mode of this game and had fun. Although based on a manga, the enemy designs are mostly nothing to write home about, and the backgrounds can be hit or miss. But in general, the pixel art is colorful and pleasing, and for the most part the game sounds good. So Eightman gets a mild recommendation, as long as you know what you're getting into. Don't expect anything groundbreaking. Expect a reasonably fun 30-minute casual arcade experience with a cheap end boss, and you shouldn't be disappointed with Eightman. Thank you for watching another episode of this Neo Geo survey series. We're going through every Neo Geo game in order of catalog number, and next time we've got another unreleased title, Fun Brothers, NGH-026. So please like, comment, and subscribe, and join me next time to see what kind of game we missed.